out of the country on Sunday night, arrived on Monday, was at the Martin Luther King Center in the US. So the joy and comfort of flying Hustler jet, some of the journalists were lucky enough to travel with the head of state, and they're giving first accounts of just what it feels like being in the same jet with the President of the Republic of Kenya. All right, let's take a look at the Star newspaper and what has been printed out on top of the page. Ruto gets 3 billion shillings from the Coca-Cola for plant upgrade. Ruto gets 3 billion shillings from Coca-Cola for plant upgrade. Power was rocket Mount Kenya as MPs defy Gachagua. That is a different story. However, good is as Equity Bank set to sign major basketball deal with America's NBA. So that is a story that is on page 6 on top of the Star newspaper this morning, where Ruto will get 3 billion shillings for Coca-Cola for Nairobi plant upgrade in US state visit. Aside from that, more partnerships such as the NBA partnering with Equity Bank to support basketball growth, which is very much anticipated. And so Ruto has had the distinguished honor of being the first African leader to be granted a state visit by US President Joe Biden in 15 years. This is a reflection of the close diplomatic ties and shared history between the two countries. Topics of trade, innovation, health, climate and security will feature with a view to strengthen cooperation over the next 60 years and beyond. Also, top of the page, Power was rock Mount Kenya as MPs defy Gachagua. That is a story that is on page 4 and 5 this morning, where supremacy war rocks Mount Kenya as leaders plot against Gachagua. The power struggles are sweeping Mount Kenya as youthful and ambitious legislators within UDA are audaciously contradicting the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. While divisions deepen with UDA in ranks, opposition bigwigs from the region are plotting to make President William Ruto a one-term president replaced by their own lineup. Now, after the Limuru 3 conference last Friday, leaders called for unity and their own presidential candidate come 2027. And some participants are now saying the interests of the region cannot be addressed by an outsider, meaning Ruto, who hails from Rift Valley. Now, leaders angling for Mount Kenya leadership include, in the UDA wing, include Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, Kiharu Member of Parliament Ndindi Nyoro, and Public Service Moses Kuria. Public Service CS Moses Kuria. The Azimio wing, who are just within Mount Kenya as well, include NAK Kenya leader Martha Karua, former Agriculture CS Peter Munya, former Muranga Governor Mwangi Wairia, and the former Laikipia Governor Ndiritu Muriithi. So supremacy was who is who in the mountain region. So that is the headline on the Star newspaper. Now let's take a look at the Nation newspaper this morning and what headline has been printed out. Where to get the best paying jobs. That is the headline, where to get the best paying jobs. Now, a survey has been conducted that reveals accommodation and food service, transport and financial sectors are the top employers. So this is where you'll get a job in the accommodation industry or food industry, in the transport or the financial sector is where a lot of jobs are at. Now, multilateral bodies and non-governmental organizations such as the World Bank and the United Nations offer the best paying jobs, with dominant sectors like real estate and agriculture among the least rewarding, according to the latest 2024 economic survey. The economy also registered the second fastest growth rate in 5 years, boosted by improved agriculture productivity and a tourism boost, even as the country registered an increase in crimes pushed by a spike in the theft as Kenyans sought ways of surviving the hard times. Now, the growth in informal sector wage employment is at 4.5%. Crime cases reported in the country has seen a 19% rise. The economy has grown by 5.6%. The GDP, the gross domestic product, that is, grew by 5.6% in 2023. Exports grew by 15.4%. The tourism level, global tourist arrivals grew by 34%, while agriculture contributed 7% to the country's GDP. So That is on the Daily Nation top of the page, as well as Gachagwa's UDA allies accused of blackmail. Gachagwa's UDA allies accused of blackmail, still on the Mount Kenya supremacy wars. And the picture as well, Ruto's US state visit. So today will be day 2 as he seeks to complete his overstate visit to the US. He will meet President Joe Biden. I believe should be on Thursday. And then on Friday, he will meet, have a roundtable discussion with the Vice President, that is Harris, amongst other meetings that have been lined up this week. So that is the headline on the newspaper. Okay, let's take a quick breather. But when we come back, we'll be getting into the conversation of the day, depression in marriage. We'll be joined in studio by a counseling psychologist who's also a marital counselor, as well as a pastor, that is Pastor Ann Gashuki. We'll be back. Can depression in marriage lead to divorce? What are some of the strains that are witnessed in marriage due to depression, and as well as how does it affect the spouse? If one spouse has got depression, how does it affect the other? Are there instances when both of the spouses are depressed in that particular marriage? So we'll be taking a look at all these aspects. Your feedback is highly welcomed. Talk to us across our social media platforms on EBN TV. Our SMS line is 23059. Any questions, thoughts, comments perhaps that you have, we'll be glad to sample your feedback just before we close the show. Now let me introduce my guest this morning in studio, not a new face. I'm joined by Pastor Ann Gashuki, who's a counseling psychologist, as well as a marital counselor. Thank you for your time this morning, Pastor.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for having me in studio.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Now, depression, we talk about depression a lot. This is what people have come across, with, and sometimes it could be, somebody's just single but depressed. But we've also got a situation where somebody's depressed and they're married, and it has got its own effects that, ripple one way or the other. So perhaps we can start by just understanding, how does depression look like in marriage, or at least what is depression for that matter?
Thank you so much. Let me start by defining what depression is. Depression is a broad topic, but maybe we can do it within the context of marriage.
Yes.
So depression is a common mental disorder characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, and somebody will feel helpless. There is also a feeling of hopelessness. You feel as if you've lost hope in life, and then you lose interest or pressure in activities. And basically within a marriage setting, this is whereby you have a spouse, and this spouse becomes moody, or sometimes he's feeling sad. And there is that feeling of, nobody can help me, or I can't get help.
Yeah.
At that point, you may find that, there is a conflict that will arise because, when you enter into marriage, there are expectations that you have. And many of us get into a marriage where you expect to find peace, to find joy. But when you lack that, then that is a red flag. Yes.
Does this happen, when assuming you're getting married in June, yeah? So there's somebody that has gotten married in June, and then a couple of months later, that sadness, the expectation is not met. Is it at that point that depression now kicks in, when you expected this to be, perhaps smooth, and it's not happening that way? Is that the point where it starts, or does it, start even, the indicators just before the marriage?
I would say there are many causes of depression, and maybe we'll try to look at the causes so that we can know when depression gets in, or when we can define it as depression. But allow me to say this, that depression, remains a significant public health concern in Kenya, which is ongoing challenges. We have many challenges that are related to even access to mental health. There is financial issues. And at that point, allow me now to take you to some of the causes of depression, so that we can know when maybe to call it depression, because people come and they self-diagnose themselves.
Yes.
So there are many causes of depression, and we have we classify them under different classification. And allow me to say this, that even the lifestyle that we live, so the how we live, the financial struggles, and when you overwork, when there is stress, when you have unhealthy habits, that falls under the category of lifestyle. But another cause of depression is cognitive. How do you think about yourself? Which falls now under what we call low self-esteem. If you don't esteem yourself, that can be a cause of depression. And also, we have people who have a temperament whereby they are perfectionists. So you can imagine, if you are a perfectionist and you enter into marriage, you have those expectations. So cognitively, because of those expectations, when the expectations are not met, that can be a cause of depression. And biological, we also have biological factors. These biological factors are what we call predisposition factors. Maybe you have, hereditary factors. You come from a family where people are depressed. There is a trend, a history. So that is what we call biological factors. And also, when you have chemical imbalances, as an individual, your body can have some chemical imbalance. That can be a trigger for depression. Finally, situations in life. When there is abuse in marriage, when there is grief and loss, and even when you have poor social network. And, all these can be triggers.
Yes.
If
we could speak about the financial struggles, because obviously with the surrounding environment, it may as well be a contributing factor if you look at the economy, etc. So how do you deal with that? If at a point in life you're married and you're having financial struggles, which will ultimately lead to depression, because either you're not having enough money for school fees, you're not having enough money for even to eat. So how do we manage that? Because it is one way or the other unavoidable. Everyone has got financial stress, often more than not.
Thank you. So maybe we can start by trying to understand the symptoms of depression, because financial struggle right now, economically in our nation, we have some financial strains. So, but how does depression come in? So, how do you know that you have depression or depression is coming? One, we have symptoms of depression. And you can't talk about depression maybe after a one-day event. In counseling psychology, we have some tools of measuring. And in order for you to talk about depression, you must have had some symptoms. And I'll actually highlight them. And they must have been persistent for more than 2 weeks. So you can't just claim that financially I'm straining, so I'm depressed. We have some tools. So if you are depressed in marriage, or if there is depression in marriage, you know, when sadness persists, you know, you can be sad and you actually don't understand, why am I sad? Maybe you've gone through situations in life, and you know, people are different. There are people who are able to cope, so they can go through the same circumstance or situation in life, but they are able to cope. But there is this person whose sadness is persisting.
Yeah.
And then they feel fatigued. And then there is also a change of appetite. Maybe you are eating too much or less. That's an indication that something is happening. Or maybe you have difficulty in concentrating. You know, those are the indicators. And sometimes you can, you know, you can express that feeling of worthless, I'm not worthy. And when these symptoms are there, you know, in a marriage, you can imagine that emotionally they will affect the relationship. Yeah. And when they affect the relationship, there are some outcomes. Yeah. And you asked about the financial strain.
Yes, yes.
It is very important to understand the economic status and your, you know, your budget, your limits.
Because not live beyond your budget.
Yes, yes. Because if you don't understand your limits and you try to live beyond your limits, then you get stressed. And when you get stressed, if you are not able to cope with that stress, because you keep thinking about the many things that you have not done and how you should do them, and you keep maybe comparing yourself with others and even competing with other couples.
Yeah.
And you forget that you have your salary, your spouse have a salary, or maybe even one of you is jobless. So that's a limit. Yes.
And you know, in terms of a couple that is just living within its means, you know, they're not paying an affordable house for them, they're not taking their kids to schools which they cannot afford, everything is just in between the line, but they're still struggling financially. You know, is there any aspects of it that they need perhaps to just tweak a little bit so that, you know, they're able to just live comfortable?
I would bring in the aspect of communication. In marriage, people need to sit down and communicate, talk about their financial income. But unfortunately, people don't want to talk about their salary. They don't want, they actually hide their pay slips, such that even if you ask a spouse, how much does your spouse earn? So when people are not open to each other, you keep, you know, assuming that your spouse has money. So you can come up with a budget, or you go and you know, get a mortgage or a loan, thinking that your spouse has money, but you've not communicated. And when you do that, you end up in a strain, financial strain, and that can be a trigger of depression in marriage. Yes.
You know, you said somebody who's just experienced perhaps a financial struggle for 1 day or 2 weeks should not say they're depressed. You know, is there a timeline to how long it takes for it to manifest and for it to, you know, be diagnosed by a psychologist that this is depression? Is there an ultimate timeline?
Yes, according to DSM-4, that is the tool that we use. We call it Diagnostic Statistic Manual. You know, all those symptoms that have arisen must have persisted for over 2 weeks. Yes.
Wow, over 2 weeks.
Yes.
Right, and no self-diagnosis. You know, you should not sit at home and say, hey, I've been depressed for 2 weeks now, and yet there's no proper, you know, diagnosis, isn't it?
Yeah, because even people come into our clinic, and they already have a self-diagnosis where they tell you that kindly, daktari, I need some antidepressants. And then when you assess and diagnose, maybe it's just stress, which can be handled.
All right. Now, the hereditary cause or the biological cause, you've said sort of like runs in the family. And there's that thin line where perhaps you don't have the history about your family and how they struggled or what they were struggling with, but yet you find yourself in that position. So for the hereditary cause, how should one approach it and how should one deal with it?
Yeah, when you get into a clinic, or when you find a professional counselor, they do what we call history taking. That is how they introduce the session. And they also assess the signs and the symptoms. And we actually do a psychological analysis whereby when you come into our clinic, we ask you about who you are, whether your parents are alive, and that is how we capture some aspects. Yes. Yeah, where you come from, a history, we capture that.
Do many of the victims, unfortunately, do they ever, understand in advance that it could be something hereditary that it runs in the family?
What I've realized is that many of them are not aware. But when you come and we start exploring the history, that is when they actually start realizing, okay, kumbe, what is happening in my life, I saw it. Yeah, there are these symptoms that I saw in one of my parents or in one of my relatives.
Yes.
And that's how we are able to trace a historical trend. Yeah.
Right, so just for the viewers that are tuning in, you've talked about some of the causes of depression, like financial struggles, there's unhealthy habits, stress, you've got hereditary biological issues, there's also chemical imbalances, and perhaps that is where I'd want you to explain a bit more, chemical imbalances, how does that work?
We have women, especially I would talk about this because of women who experience postpartum depression. This is a depression that hits women after they give after delivery. And this can be as a result of the hormonal changes. Yeah? And because of those hormonal changes, that is where now you can experience chemical imbalance and other ways. Yeah, but that needs to be assessed by a doctor. Yes.
Right. There's also, life situations like abuse, like grief, like loss. And, in marriage, once in a while, a spouse may lose, a close family member, or even it may happen just within that family. And then now there's grief that is involved. And this is also one of the issues that I've seen may separate a lot of couples a lot, because just people don't understand how do they deal with grief. And actually, do you even handle it fully ever? When you're grieving, do you ever just actually sit down and say, I'm handling this grief properly as it should be? Is that ever possible? Because how I grieve is different from how my partner may grieve. So in terms of grief, how should a spouse handle it in such a way that they're not sort of isolating themselves from their spouse, and neither are they also too much into their spouse's space?
Yeah. Allow me to say this. I've seen many couples who have had miscarriages. And people don't understand that miscarriage is a loss. So one spouse, maybe the woman, because of the expectations and the preparations, may suffer a lot when it comes to miscarriage. And the other partner may not understand, because they are wondering, you didn't even hold the baby. Why are you mourning?
Why are you mourning something you never had, actually?
Yes, but you can imagine, this woman had a lot of expectations. Carrying the pregnancy from conception to birth, all those months. And then there is maybe a miscarriage or a stillbirth, or even the baby dies after bad.
So bad, yeah.
That is when I've actually seen or realized that the spouse may not understand that loss, and that is a possibility, or that can trigger depression in a woman. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And another time is when maybe they lose a baby or a relative, and maybe one spouse doesn't understand the attachment, because the attachment, the how you attach or you are attached to any member can make you to be depressed or can bring depression. And maybe the other spouse doesn't understand attachment. We have what we call attachment theory. Yeah, because it all depends with how attached you are, and maybe the other person doesn't understand that.
So if a man says the wife has lost a child or has lost somebody, or even vice versa, when the man loses somebody, how should the partner now, react and adjust to show that they're emotionally available, they're physically available, so that there's no large drift that happens between the two?
I would say that grief and loss has not been understood, and there is no much awareness of grief and loss, because grief and loss is a process, and when it is not understood within marriage, it can trigger depression, because we have what we call grief and loss process, whereby you start by denial. Then after denial, we have, I may not remember, I need to remember all of them, but there is bargaining, there is getting angry, there is depression at one point, and then there is acceptance.
Yeah.
Yes. So somebody can go through that cyclic process. So if you don't understand your spouse because of the nature of attachment, then that can trigger depression in marriage, because that's a process.
Yeah.
It's a life process. Yeah.
All right. Now let's speak about how all these causes and how these symptoms, how it affects the marriage. What changes in the marriage. Perhaps there's a couple that started off very well. There are even goals for other people who look at them and say, hey, that couple is goals. So how does depression now affect the marriage? What changes in the marriage?
Yeah. Thank you. I would say that, like I said, these symptoms, let me give an example.
Yes.
When you have a financial strain, and you don't sit down and talk about your budget, and this persists the first month, the second month, and maybe there is an expectation, or we have what we call life transitions. This is a family. Maybe you talked about a single person. That is a state before you get married.
Yes.
Maybe you are used to your salary and doing your own budget, and it is only you. But you can imagine now when you get into marriage, you have your spouse. It ceases to be a house, but it is now a home, where you are two or more than two. You will have relatives visiting. So if you don't sit down and talk about finances, actually money matters. Money matters. Yeah. So if you don't talk about money, then you end up having a financial strain, and that can be a trigger of depression, especially when you don't communicate about what you are going through. Yeah.
So emotionally, what now changes within the marriage? How will a marriage that has got depressed people, unfortunately to say, look like?
Let me give an example. When you feel that your expectations are not met, or you have an assumption that your spouse understands you, and they don't understand, or even they are not aware of what you are going through, you start feeling worthless. You start feeling helpless. You can even experience that feeling of, I don't know what I can do. That is what we call hopelessness. And you don't know, if you're not keen, and you only think that these are just normal feelings, and then you are not, the issue is not addressed. And that is why we are talking about the symptoms must persist. Because you can feel that, and then you sit down and you address the issue, and that is gone. Because maybe you will come up with a budget, or you make your spouse to understand, hey, this person was very close to me. Or maybe I don't like the way you are talking to me because emotionally you are abusing me. Yeah. So there are all those triggers in marriage that can bring about depression, and unless they are addressed, they can persist. Yeah.
You know, who is to address this issue? Should it be the spouse that feels these extreme levels of sadness, or should it be the spouse that is not feeling any sort of sadness, is not being depressed? Who should be the first to go to the table and say, we need to talk? Because I tend to feel like the depressed person may expect that my partner should know this is what I'm feeling. They should approach me and talk to me. Or in instances, the other partner who's not feeling anything is very, you know, emotionally at a very proper level, will expect you're the one going through something. You need to talk and voice it out. So who should, you know, be the first to approach the issue?
I would say both of them. You know, starting from the person who feels depressed. If you feel that things are not okay, communicate to your partner. Because maybe you may assume that they know what is happening and they don't know, they are not aware. So I would say from that perspective, if you feel you are not okay, communicate to your partner. On the other side, if you feel or if you see some behavior, some habits that are not normal, some signs, try to reach out to your spouse. Try to find out what could be happening. Because some of the things, maybe like you initially talked about, you know, maybe my coping skill and my coping strength is not like yours. And maybe I'm able to cope and you're not able to cope. And if somebody is not able to cope, that is what we call, you don't have inner strength. If you don't have that inner strength, you may assume that your partner is also going through the same, but you may find them very strong, doing everything. So try also to reach out to your partner. What could be happening?
Now, if a partner has now established that, or at least the two partners have established, so one of us is not okay, what is the first step they now need to take from that point onwards to ensure that, you know, they're able to deal with the issue and that they're able to, you know, be victorious, for lack of a better word, at the end? So what's the starting point after they've been able to establish there's a problem?
Okay, you know, when you're able to establish that there is a problem, that is what we call awareness. You start becoming aware that, hey, something is not okay. So when you realize that something is not okay, as an individual, we recommend self-care. Take care of yourself. Self-care, take care of yourself. Actually, I like what somebody said, if I don't take care of myself, who will? I may not have power over what happens to me, but I can take charge of my reactions. In counseling, we have what we call locus of control. This is whereby, you know, you take charge of yourself. You know, like when somebody comes in for counseling, we don't counsel the spouse who is not in the counseling session. We start by counseling the spouse who have come to seek help. So when we talk about self-care, we encourage individuals to take care of themselves. Take charge of your life. That is what we call locus of control. Locus of control means, do you allow situations to control you, or are you in charge of situations?
Yeah.
Because situations will come in life. Whatever we were calling, even financial strains, at one point in life, you will find yourself not economically stable. So do you allow the forces, all those forces, to hit you and cause instability in your life, or do you take charge? So in counseling, we call that locus of control. Take charge of your life.
Yeah.
Or be in charge of your life. Yes.
Now, if we speak about the aftermath, if the issue remains unresolved, and there can't seem to be a similar ground where the spouses, or at least the married couple, can stand on and say, okay, there's a problem, let's seek help, but they don't seem to have that solution. And, you know, each of them is just on their own emotional journey now because, you know, of other contributing factors. How often does depression lead to divorce?
I would say, first, it all depends with the stability of that couple. Like, how did they get married? Like the foundation in marriage. Because if somebody found out that, or if your marriage is founded on financial stability, because there are people who get married because they can see the financial ability in a person. So if it's shaken, if that foundation, you know, the Bible talks about foundations, if that foundation of finances is shaken and your marriage was not founded on love, that is a trigger that will definitely bring depression in life or in marriage. Yeah.
And so, wow, because, you know, a lot of people may just have assumptions about issues, and unfortunate to say that, you know, not all couples have got that privilege of walking into a marriage counselor or to even a psychologist to say, you know, this is what happens, because you've got people that live perhaps in rural areas, or persons that live in slum areas, or even in developing areas. They do not have that privilege of going to a marriage counselor. So in cases like that, Pastor Ann, you know, what should happen?
Yeah, I can imagine like a scenario where you can't access mental health,
Yes.
which has also been a problem, because even most insurance covers do not actually consider mental health as a sickness. But maybe back to the rural area setting, there is what I can call the inner strength, that, you know, there are many factors that can help couples to cope, even when they cannot access mental health services. And, you know, one, I would say we have what we call social support. In our cultural setting, traditional setting, you know, we had a way of how issues were solved. Because maybe people would look for somebody who is older than them, what we now call mentorship. And they would go, sit down, and try to seek help from people whom they can trust. So even in a rural setting, that one also, especially for couples, works well. Because people can identify with somebody who they think can help them in their marriage. We also have churches. Because some of people may have a Christian setting whereby they have a spiritual authority whom they can go and consult in case they feel this issue, we are not able to resolve this issue in marriage. Yes.
Now, there are those couples that want married, you know, on the church altar. they did what we call come we stay. For those kind of couples, who should they be looking up to? Is it, you know, perhaps an older couple that have been married for a long time, or that is mentoring them? In that case and scenario, what should happen? Because there are those that perhaps, you know, don't go to church. I don't have that spiritual authority that they obey. So in that case, who should they be looking up to?
You know, we have a challenge of people who, you know, after, you know, after finishing their school, or what we call the KCSE.
Yeah, KCSE.
You know, these teenagers move into urban areas.
Yeah.
And you know, in urban areas, we don't have those settings, parental, in rural setting, we have those parental advices,
Yeah.
whereby parents sit down with their children and they talk about issues, and they prepare them for marriage. Somehow they do prepare them for marriage. But in case someone is in a rural setting, we have those community, you know, we have those authorities, those people who you can count on, even if you are not a Christian. But there is a couple that you admire, an elderly couple. You know, that is a good source where you can try to seek help. Yes.
All right, there's a question that has come in from David Njue, who says, on attachment theories, is there an attachment style that has a higher depression rate than the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there is. It all depends with how close. You know, you can be siblings, but there is one sibling that you will feel more attached to than the rest, even if you are, say, you come from the same parents. And also, even in a marriage setting, it all depends with how attached you are. Because you find that there are people who, even if they are married, maybe even during honeymoon, they quarreled. They started quarreling when they were dating. You know, you can imagine that foundation is shaky. Yeah, it is shaky. Yes.
So with attachment, you know, how does attachment look like, basically? Because there are couples who perhaps they want to work together, they want to do everything together. You're supposed to be home at this time. If you're not home, this is what happens. So how does attachment look like actually?
Attachment is basically friendship. You know, you can be attached because of marriage, because of children. You can be attached because of money.
Like that is the only thing that brings you people together.
Yes. But when you are attached because of love, and you know, we have love language. And love is not infatuation. It is not because of something. But true love, even when it is tested, you know, in true love there is friendship. The reason why people can move together, the reason why people can stay together, the reason why people can be working together, because I find a friend in you, not a wife only, but a friend.
Yeah.
So that attachment now moves from the marital relationship because maybe of what we call it, when you get a legal document.
Marriage certificate?
Yes, when you get, but you know, there is more than just having a marriage certificate, but having a spouse who is a friend, you know, that will create attachment. And that attachment is out of love. So that is the attachment that can stand, even when you don't have finances, even when something happens, even when you don't have a child, because sometimes you can enter into marriage with an expectation that you will have a baby. Even when there is barrenness, if the attachment was out of love, that marriage can stand.
Wow. Yeah. And so I think what I'm getting from you, Percy, is that in marriage, if you've married your friend, you're able to deal with these issues, because you don't want your friend to suffer, you don't want to, you know, be apart from your friend. And so it all falls back to the foundation and the basics on where you started from, doesn't it?
Definitely yes. Because friendship, a friend in need.
Yeah, is a friend indeed.
Is a friend indeed. It remains to be so. Yeah, because this is a person who will walk with you. This is the person who will want to know what is happening, because they know who you are. So in case your mood changes, this is a person who can know that, hey, something is not okay. Because you are a friend, we've been talking with you, we keep communication, we communicate. Because when there is no friendship, people don't communicate. So when they don't communicate, even if there is a mood swing or there is an issue, you will not know.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine if somebody comes in the evening, you don't want to know how they have been. So each one of you
maybe like strangers. Yeah.
Nakula chakula unaenda kwa bed. So you may not actually tell whether there is depression.
Yeah.
But when you are friends, you get to talk together, you eat together, you share what has been happening maybe during the day. And that's how you can also know some signs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as we wind it up, Pasi, now, how do we improve our relations, especially in marriage, in a way that we're able to deal with various emotions, not just about depression, but perhaps even anxiety, talk about this fear, or talk about stress levels. How do we improve our relations? What sort of environment should be there in marriage to help with our emotions so that we are able to, we can talk about finances, financial struggle, we can talk about other issues, but when it comes to our emotions, you will always know whatever happens, let us try to be, wary of what we are feeling, let us try to be wary and even speak about what we are feeling. What sort of environment should be there in marriage?
Yeah, I would take you to the basics. It all depends with how you choose your spouse. So when you choose a spouse, and you are friends. When you have friends, you'll be able to tell when you can talk about your emotional, your emotional health. You can talk about your health. You can talk about your expectations. And when those basics are met, sometimes also, your marriage can be shaken even after being founded on a strong foundation.
Yeah.
So maybe at that point, allow me to read this scripture, Psalm 69 verse 20.
Yeah.
The Bible says, reproach hath broken my heart. I am full of heaviness. Heaviness is what the Bible calls, depression is what the Bible calls heaviness. So the Bible says, reproach has broken my heart. I am full of heaviness, and I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. And that is where now Paul said, I encourage myself. There are some times when you need to encourage yourself. And also, as a spouse, empathize with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because even in emotions, I can be strong emotionally. My spouse could be be weak in emotions. So that is where now empathy comes in. Put yourself in the shoes of your spouse. Somebody comes into counseling, and then maybe to me, it's not a big issue, but to them it's a big issue. So I like putting myself in their shoes so that I can help them, even in what maybe may appear to be a small issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that issue is maybe depressing to them. Yeah.
Okay, so final word, Pasi, can depression be over and done with for good, or can it recur in marriage? Perhaps, you had this issue 2 years ago, 2 years later, you're back at that. So as we wrap it up, is it something that can recur, or once you deal with it exhaustively, that's it?
We have different types of depression. We have mild depression, we have moderate depression, and we have this other one that that depression that needs some antidepressant, that needs to be treated medically. And that is why now we have what we call antidepressants. In counseling, we have two branches. We have counseling psychology and psychiatrists. Sometimes we refer when depression is not at mild stage and moderate. Then we refer so that it can be addressed medically with some antidepressants.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor Anne Gashuki, for coming in this morning to speak on depression. I can see Carol Muthe, who says, tuned in from Kino. Rev Anne, you're such a blessing. There's also Daniel Gashuki Ndungu, who says, we are listening. Thank you, Reverend Anne, for the enlightenment in the subject, as well as Devin Jue, who asked a question earlier to which you answered. So thank you so much for watching and for the feedback that has been coming in. But the take home really is on, the basics of the marriage, the foundation of the marriage, on how it started. Also, marry your friend, so that you're able to empathize with your friend, because a friend in need is a friend indeed. You will always turn up for your friend, to help your friend, because you do not want them to suffer. And I hope that you've learned so much more. You can share this with a couple that you know, and many more couples, so that they can be able to understand, the various forms depression comes in, what causes depression, how you can sort that out. But most importantly, do not self-diagnose. You need to go see a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor, so that they can be able to help you with that. So thank you very much, Reverend Anne. And that is where we wrap it up this morning. Keep it EBN TV. Coming up at the top of the hour is Your Faith Today with Reverend Felix Kavoy. So do enjoy the rest of your broadcast. Have a good morning.
You are watching EBN TV.